very, very flexible. And every company and every designer and every design thinker does it differently. But the 5 steps always remain the same. Step number 1 is empathize. And this step is basically just about understanding the people you're trying to design the product for, the product or the service for. And in this step, a lot of the time, it's about gathering information, interviewing, doing user interviews, creating personas, trying to figure out who am I making this for? What is their problem? And really, what do these people do, right? It's about empathizing with the people you're designing for. Step 2 is to define. Now, in the define step, you're taking everything you learned in step 1, in the empathize step, and you're defining, and you're really kind of breaking it down and coming to conclusions about what are the user's needs. Based on everything I've learned from interviewing these people, what are their needs? What are their problems? What are their challenges? What are the types of things? What are the insights we can take from these interviews, from empathizing with the users, with the customers? What are we taking from them? What are we actually going to be able to use as information? What are we saying? This is a problem. This is a common problem. This is a common challenge. This is an observation we were able to make. How do you take everything you learned in the empathize section and turn that into insights? And this is what define is. Step 3 is to ideate. Now, you're taking everything you learned in the previous 2 steps and you're coming up with solutions. You're coming up with ideas. You're coming up with potential matches of products or services or whatever it is you're creating. You're trying to match your solution with the insights you figured out in the empathize and define section of the design thinking process. Now what you're doing is coming together and you're coming up with ideas. And often this is the bit that looks sort of like a brainstorming workshop. We've got Post-its everywhere. People are coming together. People are sharing ideas. And people are trying to come up with ideas. So it's really about coming up with thoughts and ideas that match what you learned in the previous steps. Step 4 is prototype. Now what you're doing is you're taking all of these ideas, you're breaking it down into a select few that you think might be worth making into something more realistic. And you're turning these ideas into simple, testable prototypes. They're not fully designed, they're not fully coded, they're not fully made into the real thing, but they're essentially a facade, essentially a fake thing, whether that's a digital product or a physical product. You're just trying to quickly make something that you can test with real users, and that's the final step, test.
Namaskar. Agar aap big business chalate ho, then give me your 3 hours and I will.
And in the test phase, you're taking your prototypes, the prototypes that are based on what you created in the 3rd step and 4th step, and now you're on to the final step where you're testing with real people. And these real people are, selected based on what you learned in step 1 in empathize. And essentially these real people are going to use the product and you're going to get feedback from them in real time based on what they're using. So you go back through the cycle, you go from test, once you've got your test results, you go back again into the define phase, right? You're not done once you've tested. There's going to be a lot of new insights. So these insights, you're gathering them together, again, back to the define phase, and then you're back to the ideate phase again. Based on your new learnings, you're coming up with new ideas, you're coming up with updated ideas, and then you're back to prototype again, and then you're back to test again. And that is the core design thinking cycle. And these are the 5 steps you see every time you search for anything design thinking related. And I just want to be super clear about this. You see these, they'll be overlaid on the screen multiple times here. You'll see these 5 steps. And the important thing to understand here is these 5 steps are sort of like the zoomed out map of how a design thinking process works. However, the exact exercises within these circles are not defined, okay? So you need to understand that's an important difference between design thinking and something like design sprints. In design thinking, you have a broad map of what you're going to be doing over the next weeks, months, years, but there's no rule set that says you have to do this exercise, you have to do this persona, you have to do this. Whereas in something like design sprints, it's more like a recipe, you have to do it. I'm going slightly off topic, but I wanted